Hello, everybody, and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, Arichcomiclife. My name is Richard Gill, and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 900 comedians and counting over the last 46 years. I'm genuinely delighted today to welcome my special guest, the wonderful comedian, Miss Angela Barnes. Yay!
Hello,
Hello, how are you?
I'm so happy to be here, Richard. I'm sure every guest says this, but Richard Gill, everyone in comedy knows who Richard Gill is. He is the best audience member in the world, because when Richard Gill laughs, the whole room laughs with him.
You're very kind.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for doing this. I'm genuinely delighted. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes or hour or so to talk about your comic career. I'd like to kick off by going right back to the start and asking you, how did you become a comedian in the first place, please?
Well, it was a bit by accident, really, Rich, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
It's I, a bit like yourself, was a comedy nerd. That's why I think I relate to you so much, Rich, because I used to love going to live comedy, and I was really obsessed with it and loved watching it. And it never really occurred to me that stand-up was something I could do. It was for those sort of clever people, you know, that and particularly, it's very different now, but particularly in the 90s, you know, when I was watching a lot of live comedy and stuff, it was mainly blokes. It was mainly white middle-class blokes, you know, so it just never felt like it was really for me. And but I loved watching it. And what ended up happening was I used to run a comedy night in Brighton, where I live, just in a room above a pub. And pretty much because I loved comedy, like you know, and it was just an excuse to get people to come to Brighton, and I get to see them for free that way. And of course I got to know lots of comics through doing that and stuff. And then eventually it was a tragic thing that happened. My dad died quite suddenly. This was in 2008. Yeah, you know, things like, he was only 60, bless him, and he died. And my dad was also a big comedy fan. Like, we used to watch stuff together, you know, and listen, radio comedy was our thing we did together, listen to that. And he always used to say to me, he used to come to the gigs that I'd put on, and he always used to say, why don't you have a go? You know, because I used to do bits of Amdram and think, you know, I'd get up on a stage and do things other people had written, you know. And after he died, I just thought, well, do you know what? Life's short, and this is something I love, and I would love to do it. But the problem I had was, so at the time I was, about 32, 33, something like that.
Yeah.
And the problem I had was, because I'd been booking these gigs, I sort of knew all these comedians. And so it was a bit scary to get up in front of them and have a go. And like, what if I'm really rubbish? Like, what if I'm going to make a tit of myself in front of all these people? So what I did in the end, this is quite a funny bit of the story as well, because I worked for a sort of social enterprise charity in Brighton, worked with homeless people. And my boss at the time, she was absolutely brilliant, best boss I've ever had. And they were looking at the sort of training budgets for the year, and I had a bit of money in my training budget. And so she suggested that there's this stand-up comedy course at the Comedia in Brighton, where I live, and she'd done it in the past and really enjoyed it. And she said, it's really good, it helps you with presentations and, you know, with confidence and things like that. I think it'd be good for you to do it. So actually, my work paid for me to go and do the stand-up comedy course, Jill Edwards course at Comedia. Yeah, I think they paid half of it, and I paid the other half.
Yeah.
And it was like a 12-week course. On a Saturday afternoon, I'd go, and it's like a workshop course. So you just sort of learn the basics of what a joke is and how to craft it, and sort of about stagecraft, how to stand on a stage, how to talk to people, things like that. And I absolutely loved it. And I didn't really look back. I mean, I sort of, after I did the course, I sort of started doing open spots. I never thought it would be my job. It was just a fun thing to do, you know, and really loved it. And that was in 2009, I did the course. And then it took me a while to get the confidence to actually go out and do open spots. So I think I started doing open spots in 2010. So that's 11 years ago.
Well, it's interesting with that answer, because I lost my dad in the 2010s, and he was a massive comedy fan like I was. And his favourite joke was a Barry Cryer joke, and I love Barry Cryer. Who doesn't? And,
he is the god.
He's been on here. It's been an absolutely extraordinary interview. I managed to interview him. It was amazing. And my dad died in the April, and I went to the Edinburgh Fringe in the August, and I saw Barry Cryer, and I told him this story afterwards. And he said, I'm so sorry that your father's passed on, but I'm so pleased my jokes travel. So, and Dad would have loved that.
I bet.
So, you know, it was just such a nice tribute. But
that's lovely.
I've been to many a comedy night where I am the guest in the front row, the sort of like the friend who goes along and supports all the new and up and coming comedians. And I work on the reception in a school, and the head of the department, the old head of department, became a stand-up comedian, and this situation happened. And I had to go and listen to this routine for about 20 times for him to get better and better and better. And he did, and he won the thing. Was it like that at the start for you? Did you start in little pubs after your comedy course, and then you were doing like 5-minute spots here and there?
Absolutely. I mean, my very, very first gig was at the end of the course. There was about 25 of us did the course.
Right.
And at the end, they did a little showcase, but only 12 of you got to do the showcase. So you had to audition for it. And I auditioned and I got onto the showcase, and it was just a 3-minute set. So my very first gig was on stage at Comedia in Brighton, which is, you know, still my favourite comedy club.
Yeah.
And of course it was packed out with all our friends and family, just 200 odd people, most supportive people in the world, you know. And it's very hard to fail at that gig because the whole audience just wants you to do well. And I was so nervous. In fact, Jill Edwards always tells this story about me because she had me sort of quite late on in the bill, but she had to move me to the first section because she said, you were so nervous, I thought you were going to collapse.
Wow.
I'm going to have to put her on earlier because I don't think she's going to make it otherwise. So I couldn't eat. And I'm one of those people, I'm terrible to be around when I'm nervous because what I end up doing is infecting everyone else with my nerves. Backstage, if I'm nervous, you don't want to be near me because everyone else will be feeling fine about the gig and I'll come in, I'll be like, oh, this is scary, isn't it? Oh, that audience look a bit rough, don't they? Oh, and then by the time I've finished, everyone's cacking themselves, you know? Yeah. So I think she was like, right, I better get her on the stage before she just destroys this for everybody. And of course, because it's 3 minutes, but in front of a lovely crowd and all your mates, and you know, you come off stage thinking, well, I'm a comedy god. Like, this is easy. This is brilliant. But then, of course, you go out into the real world of the open mic circuit when it's 4 men and a dog in a room above a pub, and it's like, oh, I'm not quite as good at this as I thought I was. You know, so yeah, it's a lot of that first sort of 18 months of just it's working out who you are on stage. You know, what your sort of what your voice is and what your you know, just there's a lot of workings out to do, and the best comedians you see on telly now were, you know, we were all dreadful when we started. I mean, I always use the example, I love James Acaster as one of my favourite comedians ever, and I love him. And I used to book it when he was an open spot. He used to come and do my gig in Brighton quite a lot, and he used to MC it. And, you know, like all of us, when he started, wasn't always great. You know, he would die on his art. But what James Acaster did, and this is the lesson that I really learned, and I think new comics can really learn from, is he worked so hard. And when a gig didn't go well, he would work out why. He would record it and he'd go back over it and he would work out what went wrong, work out what he needed to do. And he used to stay at my house quite a lot because I lived in Brighton. He was still living with his parents in Kettering because he was only a baby. He used to stay at my house. So I remember I'd get up and go to work in the morning at like 9 o'clock or whatever. And Acaster would be sat at the table, like working on his notes from the night before. Wow. Like he worked his arse off. And it's paid off because once it clicked for him, oh, no looking back. He's a genius.
He's extraordinary, isn't he? He's just effortless with it. It makes it look so easy.
But I think that's it with James. People go, oh, you know, it's effortless, it comes to it. But it's like, no, he worked his arse off for years to get to that point, you know, and I think people don't necessarily give him credit for that. But that's a lesson I learned, is like, oh, you have to work at it. You know, you can't just keep going and doing the same thing and expecting to get better if you're not changing things and tweaking things and working at it.
Exactly. I've told a lot of comedians this. I've actually had a go at stand up myself. I went to I know a promoter, and I said I need to get this out of my system because I've seen so many of them. And he said, well, it's a gong show for old people, and you can go on and see how long you do. So I rehearsed this script. I wrote this script about crashing cars in Carlisle, and he liked it, and he thought it was quite good, and walked on. And my opening line was, ladies and gentlemen, people think I look like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, but I can't see the resemblance myself, which I do. And one old bloke at the back just went, fuck off, and got me off. And I walked up to my sound of my footsteps, and the promoter said, have another go. So I went on, similar thing happened. And I said, I don't know how to do it. I said, I'll support them till my dying day. Never say never again, but you know, it's extraordinary, as you say. Being a member of the audience is such a gift to watch you all, and that's what this blog, I hope, is. It's an enthuse, you know, for it all.
It's my enthusiasm, and I feel sad that you felt I want you to go and try again. I want you to get back up there.
Never say never, you know. So.
Good.
So you're doing these 5-minute spots. Was there a point where you thought, I can do this well, this is going well? Did you ever find it difficult at all when you were doing it? Did you have to find your specific voice, or was there anything that you think put you off? Or
well, it's very hard to make that sort of transition from open spot to pro, for want of a better word. But I always used to worry, because I go to these open mic nights, mostly in Brighton, because that's where I started, but sometimes I get the train up to London and do the open mic nights. And you'll know what it's like. You've been to open mic nights. Sometimes there are deluded people at open mic nights, and you see them get up and they die on their arse for 5 minutes, absolute silence, and come off stage and think they've done really well. And I was really paranoid that I was one of those people. I was like, am I just hearing the laughs in my head and they're not really there? You know, I was never quite sure that whether it was, you know, whether I was doing all right or not. It's really hard to judge yourself, you know. And so it was when Up the Creek in Greenwich used to do, they used to do just like an open mic night on a Thursday night. And I went up to that one night, and I didn't know till I got there that it was a competition, that they, like, you know, just did it like a, you know, there'd be a winner at the end of the night. I hadn't realised that. And I did my 5 minutes and it went all right, and I ended up winning the night.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And I'd been, at that point, I'd been gigging about a year, 18 months, something like that, on the open mic circuit. And someone came up to me and said, have you entered the BBC New Comedy Award? The entrants are open at the moment. This is in 2011. And I said, oh no, I don't think I'm ready for that yet. And she went, well, she said, and it was, oh gosh, I can't remember her name, Ali, who works for CKP, who are a big agent. They're called something else now. They were called CKP then. And she said, I think you should enter. Like, I think, you know, you did really well tonight. You got a really good 5 minutes. I think you should enter. And so I thought, oh, okay. And it was I remember it was the day before the closing date for the competition. And this was in 2011, but the BBC at that point still hadn't worked out MP3. So you had to actually post a CD with your recording on it. And I didn't have time to post it. So I went back to Brighton that night, downloaded a recording onto a CD, and the next day got the train back up to London and handed it in at the BBC.
Wow.
Because I knew if I posted it, I would miss the deadline.
Yeah.
And I just thought, because this woman had said it to me, I thought, I've got a feeling about this now, I need to do it. And sure enough, I ended up winning it. It was 2011, and really that was the point. It was winning the New Comedy Award, that made me go, oh, okay, maybe I can do this. You know, maybe I'm not deluded, and actually, turns out other people think I'm funny. That's good.
And it took off from there. Fantastic. Yeah. But as you were saying, doing all the gigs up to that point and beyond, it's all experience, whether good or bad. because it makes. I think you have to go through the difficulties to become a better comedian.
Absolutely. That is what I learned from James Acaster. That's what he said to me when I started out. It was like, it's really tempting because when you're starting out, you record all your 5-minute spots. Because sometimes you think of something on stage and say it, and then you want to remember what it was you said, if it was got a laugh. So I'd always record my gigs. And of course, it's hot listening back to a gig that you died at or you had a bad time is painful. And you want to listen back to the ones that went well, right? You want to go, oh, listen to me, I'm brilliant. But they don't do you any favours. He said you have to listen back to the hard ones because they're the ones you learn from. And it's the best advice because although it's, cringing and painful and embarrassing to listen to yourself reliving that moment when you died on stage, 9 times out of 10 you work out exactly what happened and you learn not to do it again.
It's fascinating. It really is. There's a testimonial section in my blog where a lot of the comedians have said very nice things, and James Acaster gave me the perfect testimonial. He said, if I wasn't a comedian, I would sit next to Richard Gill all day and make him laugh. And I thought, that's so lovely. Perfect.
I get that completely. I'll never forget the first time doing ABC, doing Always Be Comedy. And it was like, I don't know who this guy is, but I want him at all my gigs, all of them. I remember saying that to James, and of course, everyone assumes you're related to James, who runs the gigs. So got the same last name.
He's my comedy
so is that brother. Your dad? Is that your brother? Because I want him at all my shows.
I wish we were related, but I must find the family tree. I do have an older brother, and he's nothing like him. Such a shame. Anyway. So what do you generally like to talk about on stage? Do you have any themes? Do you have any routines that you like to do again and again? Or
well, I think because I sort of ended up quite by accident being a sort of topical comic, doing News Quiz and Mock the Week and Newsjack and things like that. And it wasn't necessarily what I set out to do, but they're just shows that I really like doing. And, and writing about the news is great because there's always a turnover of stuff to talk about. But initially, and certainly, you get to a point where you sort of mine your own life for quite a long time. So obviously I did the obligatory My Dad Died show. Every comic with a dead parent has to do a show about it. That's the law. So I did that in 2014, and you talk about your own life because they're the things that are unique. They're the things that other people, things that happen to you, other people can relate to, but it's your story. You're not copying anyone else. You're not likely to come up with the same material when it's your own life you're mining,
Sure, yeah.
And so I remember when I met so I'm getting married later this year, hopefully.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Fingers crossed. Boris doesn't screw up the whatever. But
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. But I remember when we got together sort of 7 years ago now, and my agent saying, "Oh no, I hope this doesn't mean you're too happy," because I sort of had this reputation for being a bit of a world weary, 30-something single, and all of that. And he was like, "Oh God, she's gonna get happy now, and then she won't be funny anymore." And I remember my agent saying to Matt, you've got to sometimes treat her badly so she's got something to write about,
Well,
but there's always something to write about. And now I love being in my 40s. I love it so much. Being in my 40s suits me more than any other ages do. Just don't give a shit anymore.
No.
Anyone, and I love that you sort of get to a point you go, well, I am who I am now. That's not going to change. And things so I talk a lot about, being child free by choice. And because so many people relate to that. And, lots of comics talk about their kids, which is great because that's a good source of material.
Yes,
But it's sort of, we're looked at as a bit weird as people who choose not to have children. So I think that's quite it's nice to talk about things that can make people feel normal when society makes them feel like they're weird, There's a
lot of relatability in your comedy, I think, that is endearing, and you win over an audience very easily with that, and it makes them want to listen,
that's really nice.
No, it is.
I think it's really important that, because we've got this sort of idea of what relatable means, and I think the key is being relatable doesn't mean someone has to have the same life as you. It just means that they can communicate to you why they think and do the things they do. So it's not, people who have got kids can relate to my material, I hope, as much as people who haven't.
Yeah.
But it's that sort of, I don't know, kind of, I always say I never want people coming away from my shows thinking, you know, oh, I wish I could be like her. I want them to come away from my shows going, thank God my life's not as good like hers. Thank God I'm doing better than she is. Like, that's my job. I think as a comic, your job is to be the butt of the jokes and also make people feel good about themselves, you know?
Exactly. Like,
your lives aren't that bad. Look what I did yesterday, you know, or look what I've been up to. And I know sort of gets harder to do because people perceive, you know, she's on the telly, she must be rich. See my bank account. You know, or she must live in a nice house. Well, I don't. I live in a 2-bedroom ex-council flat. You know, it's not the life that people think you have when you do a bit of telly is not necessarily real. So I think it gets harder to keep that relatability. But I think it's really important to be like, your life doesn't have to be the same as mine. For us to, you know, for you to get the jokes.
Very much so. Can I just say as well, I cannot believe you're in your 40s. I turn 54 in August, and with me they're all laughter lines.
Well, I always say, when people say to me, what's your key to looking young? I say it's that I get up every single morning and I don't have any children.
Well, there you are.
That is my key to staying looking young. And is I still get lay-ins.
And with the relatability as well. I did a half-day writing course for my blog, and everybody who I was with wanted to be a reviewer. And the woman who invited me said, we forget who you are and why you're here. And I said, well, you invited me. And I said, can I just say, I'm not a diarist, I'm not a critique, I'm not a reporter. I'm a member of the audience out to have a good time. And I think that we're not here to hear anybody else in the audience. We're here to hear what the comedian has to say. And you know, it's wonderful that you have themes and you want to talk, and you know, it's an extraordinary thing that you do, because there are always punchlines at the end of it that will keep audiences, as I say, engaged, and relatability to what you say. And thank you very much for all you do. I think you're one of my favourite comedians. You really are.
Oh, Rich, you're my favourite audience member. So. I think you got one job as a comic. One job, and that is, are they laughing? And
You've got to be funny, haven't you?
And it's fun. You know, obviously, because I'm a woman who has the audacity to be on telly sometimes or whatever. You get the idiots on Twitter going, "Oh, you're not funny." And I just think, well, I am, otherwise I wouldn't have my job. So, and you know, it always makes me laugh because we all agree comedy's subjective, right? We all like different types of comedy and things. And so, by that very nature, I can't please everyone. And if I start trying to please everyone, that is just, you're just going to fail. You can't do it. You know, there's always going to be people who don't like your comedy, and that's fine. And they'll go on Twitter and go, "Oh, you're not very funny." And what I just think about those people is, well, how entitled are you that you think everyone on telly has to cater to your exact tastes?
Exactly.
You know, if we all agree that we have different senses of humour, which I think we do all agree on, then some of it's not going to be yours, and that's watch something else. You know what you haven't got any other channels to watch. What's like?
That's exactly right. I mean, I've taken a very positive stance with my blog, and because I've seen so many of the comedians. If I'm not such a big fan of the comic, I'm very workmanlike. I'm very, very positive in what I say. But the ones that I absolutely love, I really go for. So people can look at it and say, all right, this is what's happening here, and this is who this person is, and this is. I might go and see them, you know. And if I can get somebody to go and see it, then the blog's obviously done it.
Oh, I wish all bloggers were like you. Or reviewers, actually, sometimes, you know, you might not, reviewers, like everyone, are human beings, apparently, and they have their own tastes, you know, and you might not be their taste, but it's very frustrating when you sort of, a reviewer comes to see you, you're not their cup of tea, that's fine, but you still got, you know, a room full of people laughing, and then they give you a 2-star review, and you're like, well, just because you didn't
that's
like
wrong.
it.
Yeah.
200 other people there did, and maybe
Exactly.
2 stars is a bit unfair.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole other world of that you have to deal with. That you try not to worry about. But
what I like to do is to go to a comedy night, and if there are five people on the bill, if I haven't heard of 3 of them, that's fantastic. If I haven't read about them or anything, because it's the magic of discovering somebody new or somebody original. It's wonderful. Let's go back to. I'm intrigued about this because whenever I've seen you on stage, you always appear very confident and fearless with an audience. You mentioned before about nerves. Do you still get nerves before you go on stage? And if so, how do you cope with them?
I do sometimes. It very much depends on the gig. Like if I'm going to do James Gill's gig, for example, I won't be nervous about that because I know it'll be fun and it'll be lovely and you'll make sure everyone laughs and it'll be fun. So gigs like that I don't get nervous about anymore, but some I do. Sometimes you walk into a room and you think, oh, this doesn't feel quite right, and I think nerves are a funny thing. I always think my on-stage persona, if you like, it's me, but it's a heightened version of me. I think a lot of comics, that's what they would say. It's them, but it's this sort of heightened version. And I always say doing stand-up, it's a bit like, it's the swan thing. You look calm inside, you can be going, shit, I'm scared. And I think it's a confidence trick really for the audience. A lot of it is as long as the audience are confident in you, because the minute the audience thinks you're nervous, they're nervous.
Yeah.
And they start getting tense and worrying about you. Yeah. And if they're tense and worrying about you, they're not going to laugh. They're too tense. Yeah. So as long as you look confident, that's half the battle.
Yeah.
Look confident. And so, for example, and I used to go and do Up the Creek on like a Friday night, and it'd be really rowdy, and I'd be like, oh my God. So I'd just go on with a bottle of beer just to give me a bit of swagger. And it does something psychologically to the audience. They're like, well, she's confident. She's just drinking a beer and doing her, while inside I'm like, please don't shout at me. But it's all a confidence trick, really. And I think I've always been quite lucky in being able to cheat it, to sort of look like I know what I'm doing, even when I'm actually really nervous. And that's it's a kind of a lucky thing, really, because I know some people just can't hide their nerves.
It is. It is one of the hardest things to combat. But it always reminds me. When I was very small, we went on holiday to Torquay, a family holiday to Torquay. And as a treat, we went to see Tom O'Connor. This was in the 70s.
Amazing.
At the Festival Theatre, Paynton. I'd be about 10. And he sauntered on. And it was where I discovered my laugh, because he actually made me laugh, but I didn't realise I was that loud. And I was so loud, it actually floored him. And he couldn't continue. And I thought, I've got something here.
This is my USP. It's funny you should say that. We're very similar, because we used to go on we went on a holiday to Torquay.
Yeah.
It would have been the very early 80s, and went to see Little and Large.
Oh, brilliant.
And do you know who their support act was? It was Michael Barrymore.
Oh.
And I remember Michael Barrymore getting my nan up on stage.
Well, he was an exceptional clown. You had to give him that. He was popular for years.
My nan absolutely loved him, and she passed away before all the sort of scandal happened and all of that. So she never, she as far as she was concerned, he was a good man.
Let's move on to Edinburgh. I've been going to the Edinburgh Festival since 2005. It's my holiday, and I go and see about 50 comedians or 50 shows in a week. I'm absolutely shattered, but I cannot get enough of it.
Shattered thinking about it.
So I'm intrigued. What was your first Edinburgh Fringe like? What year was it? What feelings did you have about it?
Well, the first year I went to the Edinburgh Fringe and did a show, it wasn't as a comedy show. I was in a student theatre company when I was 18, and we went and did a play. 1995 that was. And I mean, we were one of those awful, you see them on the Royal Mile, you know, those awful theatre student companies that we performed to about 3 people a night, and it was pretty terrible, but the experience was incredible. And while I was there, I like you know, I was like, I can just watch loads of, so I'd have the show at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever it was, and the rest of the time I was just watching comedy. It was brilliant. So that was my first bit, and I used to go as a punter, sort of not every year, I couldn't afford it every year, but you know, every now and then I'd go up for a weekend or whatever and see what I could see, and I absolutely loved it. And the first year I did, now let me see, it would have been 2010. I was 2010 I went up, I just started doing open spots, but I went up as a tech, so I teched shows for other people. So I Helen Arnie's show that year, and who else did I tech that year? There was a sketch group called The Leftovers who aren't doing it anymore, but I teched them. And then in 2011, it was really funny because I went up again as a tech, but to do open spots while I was up there, you know, and I was teching Nish Kumar was in a double act then with Tom Neenan. And they were called Gentlemen of Leisure. And I was their techie, right? So this was August 2011. Now in June 2011, so 2 months before Edinburgh, I won the BBC New Comedy Award. So suddenly everyone was like, what are you doing in Edinburgh? And I was like, well, I'm teching Nish's show. And so Nish sort of, you know, rang me up and said, well, you're not going to want to tech our show now, are you? You're going to be doing your own show. I said, no, I've said I'll take your show. I'll still do it, because it was a sketch show. It's quite complicated. You know, we've been rehearsing it. I was like, no, I'm still going to honour that, you know. So they had on their flyers for their show, it was like, teched by BBC New Comedy Award winner.
Brilliant.
Even though I didn't say a word in the show, I was just twiddling knobs at the back.
That's brilliant.
So that was 2011. So I in 2011 I was just doing open spots, and then 2012 I went up and did a 2-hander. So like half an hour with Matt Richardson.
Brilliant. What a comedian!
He's a really good mate of mine. I love him. I always call him my comedy baby brother. He's
brilliant.
Because he was like 19 when he started, and I was 33, and I used to be a bit of a mother hen to some of the younger boys. They'd be all on their best behaviour around me, you know. But I absolutely adore Matt Richardson, and so we did a show together.
That's brilliant.
And then in 2012, and then 2014 was my debut solo show.
And have you been doing them yearly ever since, or every other year, or?
I usually do so I did 2014, 2015. I didn't do 2016. And I did 2017 and 2018. Didn't do 2019. And of course I was going to go back last year, but obviously similarly this year it's not happening. So hopefully next year I'll be back.
Well, I'm a massive fan, as you know, and I've seen your solo shows Fortitude and Rose Tinted, which I thought were fantastic. And I've also seen you many times as a guest in comedy clubs. Please, can you describe your writing process, if you've got one, and where you get your ideas from?
I'm glad you said if you've got one, because mine's very loose.
The reason I threw that in is that few of them haven't.
But it's funny, actually, because I've recently, like in the last few weeks, I've been diagnosed with ADHD. And a lot of things have suddenly made sense about my life since getting that diagnosis. And I think one of the things is I'm absolutely incapable. I cannot do it. I cannot sit down and go, right, today I'm going to write jokes. Just can't do it. Not happening. And I know some comedians can do that. I know some comedians treat it very much like, you know, from 9 to 5, I sit, I have my lunch break, and I like a 9 to 5 job. For me, doesn't work that way. All that happens is I sit crying at a laptop screen, you know, going, why won't it come? And I've sort of learned over the years that the process doesn't matter. It's the end result that matters, you know. So for me, what I do, I'm a compulsive note taker, and I also don't trust my memory one little bit. So every time I think of something that I think's funny, or might have something funny in it, I write it down, or I put it on my phone, or if I'm driving, I get Siri to take a note of it. Which very often I then have to translate what Siri's written and try and remember what I actually said. which is always fun. But so I do it that way, so that then when I do come to go, right, okay, I've got to get some new material together. I've got lots of starting points. I've got lots of ideas, and I've got I sort of know where I'm going. I kind of tend to start with the punchline, if you like, and then, or start with the core punchline, and then build on it. And so a routine might start off as one joke and end up as 10. You know, and it'll sort of build gradually. So I was
just going to say one of my favourite parts about your act, and I was trying to remember the phrase for it, is when you tell a joke and there's a punchline, you're very good at adding on 2 or 3 more punchlines so the audience keep laughing, and you're one of the best at doing that.
Thank you. Well, it's funny, I did Stu Goldsmith's podcast. I did that a few years ago. And honestly, I love Stu Goldsmith. It was like therapy, that podcast, because he got stuff out of me that I was like, oh God, I didn't realise that. But I did realise, and I stand by this, that the reason, because that's often picked up on with me, is that I do toppers, and I do, a routine will have lots of jokes along the way. And I say the reason for that is I'm such an anxious person that if I don't do that, if I leave it a long time till I get a laugh, or too long, I start losing faith in it. Completely. And if I lose faith, the audience is going to lose faith. Whereas if I can build in a laugh at least every sort of 20 seconds, then I know that I feel safer. I'm like, oh, it's okay. They've got, if they don't laugh at this one, I know there's another one coming along in a minute. So you know what I mean? It just, so it's more out of anxiety than anything else. That I just go,
you are superb at doing it, because you always, I mean, I'm loud enough with the laughter, but everybody I take with me will recognise the toppers, like you say, and there's another one coming and another one and you're so good at doing that. So thank you again.
No, thank you.
You've made regular appearances on TV and radio, most notably on TV's Mock the Week and as a guest on Live at the Apollo, and also as the host of News Jack and the News Quiz and the Now Show on Radio 4, which I've been in the audience at many a time. How do you think, how does TV and radio differ from live stand-up? Do you think it does? Can you say what you like, or how do you think it differs at all?
There's the big difference between live stand-up and radio and telly is that in radio and telly there's an edit process.
Right.
So in a lot of the stuff that I do on radio and telly has an audience in the room, be it Mock the Week, News Quiz, whatever. You have an audience that's there, but you're also playing to the audience at home.
Right.
And what the audience at home get isn't the same as what the audience in the room get.
Yeah.
Because, so for example, you take Mock the Week, it's a 28-minute show it edits down to. We record for over 2 hours.
Yeah.
So you do play it a little bit to the people in the room, but you always have to have in mind what's going to be in the edit, what is going to, so for example, on Mock the Week, I can't do a 10-minute rant about something, because a 10-minute rant about something they're not going to spend half the show with me having a rant. That's just not going to make the edit, So you sort of have to think about things a little bit different. It's not just about keeping the people in the room happy, because while you want them laughing in the room, they're not the 2 million or whatever people who are going to watch it later. You've got to keep them happy. So it's a very different dynamic, and also it's just the things you have to think about for telly and radio that you don't so much in a live show. The fact that lawyers are going to be checking it over, so there's certain things you can't talk about. So for example, if there's an ongoing court case involved with a news story, then there'll be certain things you can't say, or they can't broadcast.
Right.
You might say it in a live show, but they can't broadcast it on telly. So you've got little things like that you're thinking about, and just the dynamics different. Obviously the dynamics different between stand-up and panel shows or whatever. And there's, you're bouncing off other people, which stand-up, you're always on your own. You've just got you. You haven't got that sort of call and response thing going on, where somebody might say something funny and you can do a topper and they do one back to you, and it's all good fun and banter. But even doing stand-up on telly, so doing live at the Apollo, for example, was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life. I've only done it once, and I had whooping cough.
Oh no!
when you listen to it, if you watch it, you'll see, like, my voice is just. I mean, I've got quite a rough and ragged voice anyway, but on that, I'm properly like wheezing my way through it. And obviously the Apollo in Hammersmith, massive venue, 3,000 people.
Many times, yeah.
And it was incredible to do it, but I was just, it's so nerve-wracking to walk through, and there's all the smoke and the lights, and you're just going, oh my God, there's been a terrible mistake. Like, I'm not ready for it.
I've been in the audience for the recording of it, and
it
must be terrifying when you walk through and it's smoke, and you can't see where you're going, and suddenly the lights are there. I can imagine.
There's like a little box on the stage, and they sort of say, right, don't leave that box until, because the scenery sort of lifts up in front of you, and they're like, just stand in that box until you can see where you're going, because otherwise you're just going to walk into the scenery. Just sort of stood in this little box, like going, oh my God, and of course the difference about doing stand-up on telly, particularly live at the Apollo, is, when you go and watch stand-up, the audience is sat in the dark, right? And that's the best way to be, because when you're in the dark as an audience member, you can lose your inhibitions. No one can see you, so you can laugh, you can do your snort laugh. It doesn't matter. No one can see you, and you're all one big entity. It's fine. Whereas in TV, the audience are lit because they cut away to the audience laughing. So suddenly you walk out on stage at the Apollo and you can see 3,000 people. Like, usually
that must be daunting.
Apollo, you can see the front row and then a load of darkness, and you can just pretend they're not there. But when you do it on telly, suddenly it's like, there's 3,000 people, and I can see them all. And I can see every single one that gets up and goes for a wee, or that's shuffling in their seat, or I can see it all. So that's quite daunting.
Terrifying.
But I remember the first TV series I did was Stand Up for the Week, which was filmed at the Clapham Grand. And similarly there, the audience were lit. And I remember someone could do a thesis on audience dynamics. I find it all fascinating. But the audience would clap everything there. And I remember when it was on telly, people would go, that's got to be canned applause. Like, people don't clap that much. And you go, they do, because they're so self-conscious. When you've got a camera in your face, it's much less embarrassing to clap your hands than it is to throw your head back and laugh. So it's just really weird dynamics happen with TV stand-up.
That's
it's very different to in a live venue. And so people watching it on telly, they're not getting the same experience.
No. Can you tell me how Newsjack came around? Because I'm a big fan of that. And also, how did Mock the Week come around? Because you're a perfect guest on that. When you're on it, I know I'm going to have a good time, because you're not afraid to butt in and say your piece, and it's always hilarious.
No, thank you. I love doing Mock the Week now. In fact, next week will be my 30th episode.
Wow,
so,
congratulations.
Quite excited about that. Thank you. It's Newsjack was, I auditioned for it. I was asked to audition for it. So it was Nish was hosting it before me. And sort of said he was going to be leaving. And obviously I loved Radio 4 comedy, and up to that point, I think I'd been a guest on News Quiz, I think at that point, on the Now Show and things like that. And so I was sort of put forward as one of the hosts, and there were several people auditioned. And I got the job, which was amazing. And it was such a good show to do that, because
it's so well done, and you're very good at bringing everybody in who you've got on it, and balancing it out, and it's just wonderful to listen to.
Well, I really enjoyed my time on that show, because it feels like it's doing something really good, because it's open access. If people listening, watching don't know, anyone can submit jokes to Newsjack, and they do, and they get on air, and it's one of the only ways really to get a foot in the door, to get your stuff on air at BBC. It's a hard, and it's competitive. So it's a really good open access show, and so I was really proud to be part of that, to sort of get new talent, find new writers, and they would have because the Newsjack would be the presenter and then 3 actors to do the sketches with the presenter.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not an actor really, and I'd be with these professional actors. They're doing all their clever voices, and I was like, well, all the characters are going to sound like me, I'm afraid. That's just, yeah. But they were great, and they would get new people on that. You know, they were just coming through, new young actors and things. So it was always really exciting and young and a fun thing to do.
There's something wonderful about TV and radio recordings. One of my favourites was we went to a recording of Have I Got News for You, and nobody knew who the guest presenter was going to be, and it was the first time Bruce Forsyth did it. And it was just incredible. It was his comeback, and there's a bit on it where he's trying to read the autocue and he's going da 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 da, and I'm above Ian Hislop's head with my mate, and I am crying with laughter, and my mate's got a loud clap, and we're like going 10 to the dozen, da 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 da, and he turns around and he goes, "Please, this is satire." And I just collapsed, and you can hear me as clear as day on the video. And I thought, that's magic. He was just spectacular. And I love those. Mock the Week is very much like that, where I've been in 2 or 3 of them in the recordings, where, as you say, a lot more gets recorded and it's all edited up. But it's fascinating, the answer that you gave, because for me, you can't beat the live experience. You know, it is extraordinary, because you never know what's going to happen. Who are your favourite comedians, past and present?
Oh, it's so hard. It's always such a hard question, and I always come away going, "Oh, I didn't mention." I love comedy. Obviously,
growing up.
Yeah, definitely. Growing up, I mean, my parents both loved Monty Python, so I was brought up on the Monty Python films, and and I loved. Well, I say Radio 4 comedy. Yeah. My thing. And I always say my hero, it was the late, great Linda Smith. I just adored her. And I sadly never got to meet her. She passed away in 2006.
That was tragic.
But really tragic. And what I loved about her was she was on the, regular on the news quiz, and which I loved listening to, grew up listening to the news quiz. And she was the first person I ever heard on Radio 4 who was from where I'm from and sounded a bit like me. She's from Kent, like me. Yeah. But she's not posh. She's not middle class. She's not, she was a proper working class girl from Kent. And I was like, hang on a minute, there's a working class woman on my radio. I've never heard this before, and she was the first person really that sort of opened that door for me to go, oh, you are allowed on here. You are allowed to do this. Look, Linda's doing it, and she's bloody brilliant at it. Yeah. And what I loved about her is she took no prisoners. She had this sort of, friendly girl next door sort of mannerism, but she was acerbic and clever and witty and would take you down, and she would speak truth to power and all those things, but in just such an accessible, brilliant way, without having to be mean and nasty. She was never, she was just brilliant. And sort of her and Jeremy Hardy together, that was classic News Quiz, and it'll never be the same without them.
I totally agree. I have both the books behind me. When I first came to London, I've been in London 30 years, and Linda Smith was on the first bill I ever saw at the Comedy Store. And it was Richard Morton was comparing, was Linda Smith, Steve Gribbin, who's been on here, Hattie Hayridge, and Phil Jupitus.
What a line!
A few years ago, I went to the Edinburgh Festival, and they had the Linda Smith appreciation show for the cancer research.
Loving Linda,
and we went and we went to that, and it was at the assembly, and next door went into the Wetherspoons after the show, and there was Hattie Hayridge at the bar, and I thought, I've got to go up and chat, and I must have had a good hour talking to her about it, because they used to be a double act. They used to go around London as a double act, and you could see the same sense of humour. She was an extraordinary woman, and really I'm so pleased you did say that, because there are shades of her in your act, and I mean that as a compliment.
That means a lot to me. I funnily enough, well, I'll tell you what happened, but her partner, Warren Lakin,
he wrote the book. He compiled the book.
He wrote the book. about her. And after when was this? About 2013. And in all the interviews and stuff I do, she's the person I mention as my, hero, my comedy hero, my influence and all that. And one day, it was when I was doing stand-up for the week, and I remember it so clearly. I was sat in the dressing room. It was the night we were recording. I was sat in the dressing room on my own, had my lunch, whatever. And my phone rang, and it was a number I didn't recognise, but I answered it. And it was Warren Lakin.
Wow.
Who I'd never met at this point. And I get choked up just thinking about this. And he just said he'd got my number off another comedian. And he said, I just wanted to thank you because, he said, I know you're sort of fairly new and you're just starting on telly and things like that. He said, but I just keep seeing you mention Linda's name all the time, and I just want to thank you for sort of keeping her memory going, and talking about her. And I'm so pleased that she was.
Fantastic.
And we spoke on the phone for ages. And then he said to me, would you like to come and see her archive, like all of her stuff? Wow. So her archive, he gave, after he wrote the book and compiled the book, he gave all her notebooks and posters and tapes and everything in her archive to the University of Kent, which has a comedy archive. Yeah. And so I went with Warren. We spent the day at the University of Kent and just like looking at her notebooks and her writing and listening to tapes from like the 80s when she was doing open spots. And it was so, I never got to meet Linda or work with her, but it was the closest I could get to her. And it was a real privilege to do that. And Warren is a firm friend now, like him and his partner Debs now are just big parts of my life, and I love them to bits. And it's sort of although I never got to meet or work with Linda, it's just to be part of that sort of group of people, to have been able to work with Jeremy on the news quiz. Was a dream come true. Story, I know. It's just such a warm, generous, lovely man, Warren, and for him to have made that phone call to me, he didn't have to do that, and it meant the world to me. It meant the absolute world.
I'm so pleased for you, because when I first saw you all those years ago, I thought, Linda Smith. Straight away, I thought, there's similarities here, and I loved Linda Smith, and I knew I would love you, and you have made me laugh so much in that vein over the years. It's extraordinary.
You're gonna get me crying, Ruth. You're like bloody Piers Morgan.
The reason I asked the question to everybody, it's fascinating who the heroes are. My first ever act was Les Dawson in 1975. I was 8, and a year later we saw Tommy Cooper, and I was hooked. And it was just one great comedian after another, and I thought, I've got something here, just write it all down, and of course hence the blog.
That's great.
It's really great. Like me, well, you mentioned earlier, you do go to a lot of gigs as a member of the audience, or you did do. When you're on a comedy build, you tend to watch them all on the bill, or do you still do that now? Do you still go to comedy gigs now as a member of the audience?
Yeah, I sadly, I don't tend to go to many gigs now, just because I'm working a lot in the evenings. When I'm not working in the evenings, I want to be at home with my fellow and my dog.
Yeah. Of course.
That's the sad truth of it. And it is a sad thing. I was talking about this with my friend, Phil Gerard, the comedian. We were talking about this the other day, and I was like, it's sort of, in a way, doing comedy has kind of ruined comedy for me.
Yeah. I can understand.
It doesn't feel quite like a night out any more than it does. But I still will, if there's somebody I'm dying to see that I haven't seen, or someone's come from America or something. Like, actually, unfortunately, it got cancelled because of COVID, but I had tickets to see Steve Martin.
So did I.
And Mike Short and things like that. Obviously those sort of things still really excite me. Yeah. And if I'm doing a gig, 9 times out, unless I'm doing 2 gigs in a night, so I have to go between the 2, or if I've got a really long drive and I just need to hit the road. Yeah. Usually I will stay and watch a gig. Particularly if I'm closing a gig, I like to get there from the beginning, because I think it's good to, especially at a live gig, as a seasoned connoisseur, stuff happens in the room at a live gig. Yeah. And and it can be there can be a thing that runs through the whole night, be it one audience member or something that's happened in the room or whatever that can run through the night, and that can really, it makes it really special when that happens. It makes everyone feel like this is something we're experiencing that no one else is.
Yeah.
And if you then come in to headline that gig and you've missed all of that, and so you don't reference it, then you're sort of missing these opportunities to have some fun.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So I do like to watch the whole gig. Also, I like to see, if there's new comics I haven't seen yet, it's always exciting to watch new comics.
Of course, yeah.
And the other thing is, you might have not necessarily the same material, but you might have things on a very similar theme to someone else. And if 3 comics have already done material about, I don't know, trains or whatever, you might think, oh, do you know what? I won't do my trains bit. They've had enough of trains tonight.
Yes, of course.
Or whatever,
so
just to sort of...
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, just to sort of go, I think we've covered that. I won't do that. So it is good to see the other act, but sometimes it's just not practical. Sometimes you might have 2 or 3 gigs in a night, so you're going from one to the next. So you do end up just turning up, going on stage, buggering off again.
The next one,
it's just the nature of it, unfortunately.
Just following on from that, how have you found online gigs as opposed to live gigs? Have you done many of them? What do you think the future of live comedy is?
It's do you know what? If you'd asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have said, don't be silly, you can't do gigs online, is what I would have said. And I was nervous, but I was very lucky in that the first online Zoom gig I did was the COVID Arms gig.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah.
It was incredible, so well run. And because that was the first one I did, it was in May last year. So I guess I've been doing online gigs for a year now.
Yeah.
And you sort of I very quickly realised what it is you need to do. Like, you just sort of work out from doing a couple. So I've probably done 50 odd, I think. I've done quite a lot. And you sort of work out how to play it. Obviously it's not the same as being in a room full of people, but it really has its positives, I think, doing online gigs. One is, I would say to people, if you haven't been to an online gig yet, it's not what you think. You think it will be weird and a bit eggy and a bit weird. It's actually a lot more inclusive than you think.
Yeah.
You can see everybody, you can sort of play with people, but in a really nice way. It's not, sort of disruptive, or it's just a different way of playing with an audience, which is really fun. And what it's done, and I think you cannot overestimate how incredible this is it's opened up live comedy, because even though it's online, it's still live, it's still happening in the moment, it's not being edited, it's not being edited and packaged up and then handed to you. It's all happening in the moment, and it's opened up live comedy to people who might not have been able to see it before, be that through disability, through mental health, through anxiety, through having kids at home, whatever. It's opened up this world, and suddenly they can see the people they've seen on Mock the Week or on the radio or whatever. They can see those people in a looser way, in a more live way, and they can see people they won't see on the telly for whatever reason, and I just think, I really hope that obviously I'm looking forward to performing live again. Obviously that's magical and there's nothing like it. But the Zoom gigs are a really close second, I think. As long as you work out how to play them. And what your expectations of them are as a performer. So I think what happens a lot, and I've seen it a few times, is people go, oh, this is going to be shit, and they go on and treat it like it's going to be shit, and so they don't enjoy themselves. And then the audience, and it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. But I think if you go on and you're like, right, it is what it is, and I'm just going to have fun with it. I've had some amazing nights online, really amazing.
I totally agree with you. I think when it first started off, I always look at it as a super substitution to the real thing, because when it first started off, there was no audio. So, of course, somebody like me, I was sitting here laughing at 4 walls, and I thought I was going to be taken away. But when they opened up the audio on it, that was brilliant, because the comedians could sense the timing, the rhythm of their act. They knew where they could sense where the laughs were going to be, and it opened it up so widely that you're right, anybody could join in. And not only do I go to Always Be Comedy, I started going to Happy Mondays with Sean James, and I go to Boothby Graffo's one on a Thursday, and I go to Jarlath's on a Friday, the Return of the Crack. Brilliant. And every one of them, they were all done so well, and it was so great to see and to see it carry on, because all the comedians have obviously suffered. It's horrible what's happened in the in the year that we've had. But I've just started going back to live gigs, and by God, do I miss them, because it is of the moment. I love to go out for a few beers on a Saturday night and then go in and sit there and go, right, who's going to make me laugh tonight? And I tend not to work out who's going to be on. And then when they are on, it's such a delight to see characters like yourself.
Your face, Rich, it's so lovely. I think you're absolutely right, because there's nothing like, it's a night out, isn't it? And it's not even just the comedy. It's the go for a bite to eat, have a pint with your mates beforehand, have a chat about it afterwards.
It's such a positive thing as well that you're doing. That what's not to love, and if there's somebody on that you really like your good self, it's just joyous. I have such a great time. And
it's the same for us. There's nothing like that feeling of making a room full of people laugh. Like, it sounds really, but it's a drug. Like, there's a reason we're all mad comedians. We're all addicts, right? to whatever it is that does to our bodies. We want more of it, and we want it all the time. And you like the what I think's been very impressive this year. I think what we've seen is that comedians, comedy promoters, the comedy industry are an innovative bunch. And that when it all, the shit hit the fan last year, it's like everything's shut. People went, what can we do? Not, just, oh, well, it's over. But what can we do? And of course, at first, it was a bit eggy, and it took a while to work out how to do it. And it took a while to work out how to get the best out of an online gig. But we got there, and online gigs now are great. And my hope for the future is that I think there's a world where those two things can happen. It doesn't have to be all online, it doesn't have to be all live. And I think when the comedy clubs open up again, that'll be brilliant. But I hope that doesn't mean that all the online stuff disappears, because I think there's a world full of people that can access the online stuff that will really miss it when it goes, or if it goes.
Yeah, I think if the venues could have it, they may put a screen in or a camera in, so it could be an online thing as well.
Yeah.
Because
I think live streaming, live gigs would be great. Why not?
Very much so.
Because the technology's not hard now. We've worked out how to do it. But I think also there's space for just doing online gigs for people who, for whatever reason, can't leave their house.
Yeah.
Why should they not get entertainment?
Exactly.
And now we've proved we can do it, and it's fun, and people want to keep coming back. And I've done all these different gigs, like you mentioned a handful of them then. And I get there, and some of the same people do pop up. Your good self, and you go, oh, I've seen you at a gig before. There's an audience there ready, who want that, and a lot of people that. I really hope that it carries on in some way.
Just before we go, and I have had it's been a joy talking to you. I could talk to you all night. I really could.
Same, Rich, same.
Is there anything else you would like to say? Have you got any online gigs coming up? Have you got any podcasts? Where can people find you on social media, that sort of thing?
Well, I do a podcast with the lovely John O'Farrell.
Yes.
Who some of your listeners, watchers will know from. He used to be a writer on Spitting Image and Have I Got News For You and things like that. And then he's written lots of brilliant books and stuff. And we do a podcast together. They're very funny. He's a very funny man. Don't tell him I said that. And he's a lovely, and it's my passion project, really. Our podcast, it's called We Are History, and it's a history podcast, but a silly one. We don't take, so we do the reading. It is, you will learn something, but hopefully you'll have a giggle as well. It's not like a dry history podcast, because we found, I love history, it's my sort of nerdy thing, but I found a lot of history podcasts are just a bit dry and a bit empty, And I thought, I want something that gets people interested in history, but in a way where it's just like listening to a couple of mates chatting about it down the pub. And that's the sort of vibe we're going for.
Brilliant.
And we love doing it. It's a lot of, so we've just finished our third series. So we're having a little break over the summer, but there's, 50 odd episodes on there to catch up on if you want to listen to it. Do go back and have a listen.
Are you writing a new show? Have you got a new stand-up show ready, or?
No.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get you nervous.
It's that thing, sort of, everyone goes, every comedian seems to be in the same boat at the moment. Go, yeah, the world's opened up. Oh, God, I haven't written anything for a year and a half. Oh, God, I was too busy learning to crochet. Shit. But I will, hopefully, all being well, be touring next year, 2022. This year I'm finishing a book at the moment, an audio book for Audible, so that'll be out later in the year.
Right.
All being well. And so this year is all about getting my book finished, getting married, and then just sort of gradually getting back into the swing of being a proper comedian again. Doing live shows. So hopefully by 2022 I'll have a show ready to go.
Brilliant. Well, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm just at Angela Barnes. And on Instagram, I'm at Angela_Barnesy. So it's just Barnes with a Y on the end.
Right.
And yeah, I'm trying to get better at Instagram because it's just a nicer place than Twitter. But I'm just a bit slow because I keep forgetting to take photos of things. I'll like eat a meal and then go, that was lovely. I should have taken a picture of it, but I didn't. You know. But I'm trying to get better at it. So, yeah, come and follow me on there. But, yeah, follow me. And also at We Are History Pod on Twitter for mine and John O'Farrell's history stuff.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, I cannot wait to see you live and online again soon, doing what you do best. You're one of the funniest comedians. I'm telling you, you've made me laugh so much over the years. Please keep doing what you're doing. And thank you so much for tonight.
Thank you, Rich. Total pleasure. And I can't wait to give you a hug in real life.
You're very kind. Thank you so much for your time and all the best to you. Thank you.